Okay. Good morning to you all. Hello, I'm Andrew de Block from BirdLife South Africa. Welcome to our virtual Avitourism training. So today we're on to session 8 of 10. We are nearly there, our third last session. Can you believe it? Feels like it started just the other day, but we're whizzing through the episodes. Welcome, especially if you're joining us for the first time. Just to recap, these are the webinars we've covered so far. Today we have a webinar on the birds of the other habitats. So we've split up the birds into various different sections and strata. And today we are doing a catch-all to make sure we catch everything before we have the last ID webinar on the birds of the clan Karoo on Monday. So this will be a little bit of a mishmash, although Justin has organized it for us to make sense. Again, this is a training that we're doing as part of a broader engagement in the Garden Route district, which includes the Garden Route and the Klein Karoo. And it's aimed at guides who would like to get into the Avitourism space, but anyone is welcome from within or without the Garden Route. Welcome to you all. It's lovely to have you all with us, and it's just great to have all of this enthusiasm on the ground for the development work that we're doing in this beloved niche of all of ours. These are our partners. So I'm from BirdLife South Africa. We have In Toto Retreat, represented by Roland Forvac as our local activator. And then our funders, the Western Cape Government of Economic Development and Tourism, and the Groot Cluster Biosphere Reserve. So today's webinar is another from our guest presenter, Justin Ponder. So far, Justin has presented 2 webinars, and we will have him again on Monday. In between, we had Cassie Carstens on the birds of the forest. But today we're back to a young and impressive Justin. For those that haven't listened to Justin's webinars, he is a young man. He's just finished his matric exams, believe it or not. But he's grown up on the Garden Route. He's one of the most active birders in the region. He's a fantastic presenter. And we're very, very lucky to have him at our disposal for this training course. So with no further ado, I'm going to share Justin's pre-recorded presentation. Remember, we have an opportunity for questions at the end, so do put these in the question and answer box, and we will take things from there once Justin is finished. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. If someone can let me know in the chat box that they hear the sound and the video is progressing as I click start. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone is doing fantastic on this wonderful day. Big thank you to Andrew for having me again. I'm very honored to be presenting for you guys again today. But let's get straight into it. So this is the birds of other habitats. So the aim of this webinar is to teach the identification features and showcase some of the birds found in other areas of the Garden Route, including the mountains and fynbos, beaches and coastline, as well as grassland and farmland. I've also added a couple of other species which are likely to be encountered in other areas, such as raptors, as well as aerial feeders such as swifts and swallows. So this is the last of a series of bird identification sessions. Other sessions previous to this have gone over a lot more of the more diverse habitats, such as the forest and the wetlands. So let's get straight into it. Just want to recap quickly the area we are looking at. This is the Garden Route region of the Western Cape of South Africa. So the Garden Route extends from Riversdale in the west all the way across to around Nature's Valley in the west, and then Riversdale in the east. The northern boundary of the Garden Route is the Swartberg Mountains, which runs along this contour up here. Okay, let's get started with the birds. We're going to start off with the mountainous and fynbos regions. Perhaps a quite iconic species, and it was once BirdLife South Africa's Bird of the Year, is the Cape Rock Jumper. The Cape Rock Jumper is an endemic species and is quite popular among birders. So this is likely to be found on tops of mountains such as George Peak and Swartberg Pass. The identification features of the Cape Rock jumper is this white moustachial stripe, which is found in both males and females. It also has this grayish marked back and a reddish orange belly, which is a lot more bold in the male. So this is a female bird. Next up, we have the Cape Rock Thrush. So the Cape Rock Thrush is also quite rufusy orange, but it also has a bluish gray head. The blue on the head does not extend much further down, and it stops right there on the neck. The back is also rufous and not blue. So this bird is quite commonly found along any mountainous areas or any rocky, fynbosy areas. The southern chagra is another species that is very easy to hear, but quite hard to see. It is known as a skulker, so it sits in the bush and does not often come out. The southern chagra has this brown crown, which also comes down to the back as well. It has this white stripe that goes just above the eye, and then a black line that goes straight through the eye. Has quite a long bill as well. Underneath, the bird is quite grayish, whereas there's a bit of a tinge of rufus on the wings. The ground woodpecker is another iconic species and one of my favorite birds, but this is also found on places like the Swartberg Pass and Montague Pass in the George and Oudtshoorn areas. So the ground woodpecker is the largest woodpecker in the region, and it has quite a large, strong bill. The head is also grey, and it has a pale eye. Underneath, the bird is pinkish, which is quite unique among woodpeckers. And then on the flanks and on the wings, you'll see there are some yellow spots. And then the tail shaft is also quite bright yellow. The red-winged starling is, although it is commonly found on mountains and in fynbos as well, it can also be seen in towns and gardens too. Overall, the bird is quite glossy black, but it has this grey head in the female, which is the same glossy black on the head in the male. As the name suggests, it has these red wings, which are especially prominent in flight, although they can be seen while the bird is perched, as you can see in this photo. It also has quite a long tail compared to other starlings. The yellow bishop is quite a striking bird and usually found in moist areas in fynbos. The yellow bishop has this pale bill, which contrasts nicely with a black head and belly. It has this bright yellow shoulder patch and back, which is seen in the breeding season. And most bishops have this short tail as well. The Cape siskin is also an endemic, but it is part of the canary family, and it is found pretty much typically in fynbos and on mountains. The Cape siskin has this streaky yellow crown, whereas the face and nape is a lot more grey. Underneath, it has this this dull yellow belly and chest, which contrasts nicely with a brownish red back. The diagnostic features of the Cape siskin, however, are these white spots on the tail, which are very easily seen in flight. The Cape grassbird is another skulker, which can be harder to see, but not quite as hard as the bird that's following this. So the Cape grassbird has this reddish-orange cap, it's quite similar to cisticolas, but it has this black moustachial stripe as well. It also has a very long tail, which can easily differentiate it from other cisticolas. Overall, the bird is quite well marked, so even though the chest is quite pale, it has a lot of streaks making it look a lot darker. The back as well is quite similar to cisticolas, in which it has this well-marked greyish back. So the Victorins warbler is also very popular among birders, as it is a South African endemic, but it is notoriously difficult to see. So the Victorins warbler, it has this orange eye, which is contrasting nicely with a gray ear and head. The underparts of the bird are rufous, although it is also quite different to the top of the bird, which is a lot more browner. So this bird is often heard, especially along streams and rivers in Fynbos, but seeing it is a lot more difficult and requires a lot of patience. The Cape sugarbird is a species I'm sure many of you are also familiar with. It is quite diagnostic with that long streamy tail. It also has a bright yellow vent, which many species in the area do not have. It also has that long bill, which is quite similar to sunbirds, although it is not a sunbird. It has this white moustachial stripe, which is quite nicely contrasted with a black or dark eye. The orange-breasted sunbird is also one of my favorite Fynbos species. Its call is quite regular wherever you go in the mountains. The head of the orange-breasted sunbird is this iridescent green, which is normal with all sunbirds. However, it has this orangey yellow chest, which is not found in any other sunbirds. It has a blue band, which goes across the chest between the green head and the orangey belly, and it has a lot longer of a tail than other sunbirds. However, the other long-tailed sunbird that we have is the malachite sunbird. However, the malachite sunbird has a very thin tail compared to the orange-breasted sunbird. It is also completely iridescent green all over, and it has a much longer, straighter, thin bill. Okay, we're moving now on to coastal species. So this webinar is focused on individual habitats instead of going broadly, since there are a lot less diverse habitats than the previously covered sessions. So the African oyster catcher is a coastal species, which I'm sure many of you are also aware with, but perhaps you don't know what it is. Overall, the bird is very dark black, but it has a striking red bill and eye ring, which is diagnostic. It also has these bright pink legs. The subantarctic skua is also a winter visitor, so you are less likely to see it in the summer months. Although this bird is a pelagic species, meaning it is found more often out at sea, it does often come onto the beaches as well, especially around Mossel Bay and Plettenberg Bay. The brown skua is completely brown all over, quite a dark brown, but it has these white windows in the wings, which is very easy to see when the bird is in flight. The bill is very strong as well, and it has a hook, meaning it will be catching fish and other aquatic species that are quite slippery. It is also it's quite a predator, so it steals food from other birds quite often. So you'll often see them squabbling with gulls and terns. The Cape gannet is also a pelagic species, meaning it is found out at sea, and this one is far less likely to be seen on the beach. However, I've added it to the list here since it is commonly seen from the coast. So the Cape gannet is quite prominent, being it is a lot larger than any other gulls, and it has these long, striking black and white wings, which other pelagic species don't have. So often if you look out at sea and you see a bird with black and white wings, it is the Cape gannet. Up close, the Cape gannet has an orangey wash over the head, and it has quite a sharp, long bill and a blue eye ring. The greater crested tern is the first of the terns we are going to be looking at, and is probably the most common of them that we have in the garden route. This one is found typically along the coast, and it has this bright yellow bill, which is the only tern to have a bright yellow bill completely in the region. Above, the bird is quite a pale grey, which covers across the top of the wings and the back, so that it has darker wingtips sometimes. The shape of the bird is also quite diagnostic, although this shape is shared among most terns. It has these sharp wings and this triangular tail, which is seen when it turns. Next up, we have the sandwich tern. So the sandwich tern, instead of having an entirely yellow bill, it only has a yellow tip to the bill. The rest of the bill is quite dark. Overall, the bird is also a lot more pale than the other terns. So often, if you're looking at a tern roost, the palest terns are usually the sandwich terns. They are slightly smaller than the great crested tern, but not quite as small as the next bird we are looking at, which is the common tern. So the common tern is the smallest of our regular tern species, and it is also a bird that has a completely black bill. So if you remember the previous two terns, the one had a yellow bill and the one had a yellow tip to the bill, whereas this one has a completely black bill. The bill is also a lot smaller than the previous terns we looked at. Then another diagnostic feature of the common tern is it has these black shoulder patches, which is not too easily seen in this photo, but it can be slightly noticeable there just above my laser. As I said, it's a lot more smaller than the other two regular terns we get here as well. So the Cape cormorant is another one of our cormorants. So I've covered the white-breasted cormorant and the reed cormorant in previous webinars, but this one is almost only found along the coast. So the Cape cormorant has quite a long neck, which can be seen even from a distance. So often dark birds that you see flying out at sea will be a Cape cormorant. The bill is a lot thinner than the other cormorant species, and it has this yellow gape. It also has a blue eye, which is not too easily seen in this photo, although in the cover photo for this webinar, the blue eye is a lot more easily seen. Overall, the bird is completely glossy black. So the other cormorants, if you remember, the one had a white chest, and the other one had quite a marked appearance with the grayish sheen on the back. So this one is completely black all over. The white-fronted plover is a very small species, but it is very commonly seen on beaches, especially in the wilderness and sedgefield. The white-fronted plover is quite a pale bird overall, although the belly and the forehead are almost completely snow white, whereas the cap and the back and back and wings are a lot more grayish. Okay, so now we're moving on more to our grassland species. So our grasslands are more in the Mossel Bay area, although there are some grasslands in the Plettenberg Bay area as well. So the grasslands can be quite tough with the LBJs, but I'll be covering some of them as best as I can. So first up is the blue crane, which is, I'm sure all of you know the species. It's quite a diagnostic bird. It is our national bird in South Africa. The bird is very elegant in appearance, quite bluish overall with the blackish tail and the white cap. It's got quite a long neck and a sharp pink bill. The Denham's bustard is also quite a large species and often found in farmland and fields. The bird can stand over a meter tall sometimes, so it's quite big. The diagnostic features of the Denham's bustard is this orangey rufous lower nape as that extends onto the back. The back itself is brown, but it has these contrasting black and white spots on the shoulder. As I said, the bird is quite large, and it is quite easy to pick out in a field. The capped wheatear. So this bird is also very common in the Mossel Bay grassland areas and is quite diagnostic, being quite large and distinctively black, white, and brown. So it has this distinctive white eyebrow and then the white throat as well, which is nicely contrasted with a very bold, thick black band, which extends up to the cheek and then a little bit on the forehead as well. The nape, extending down to the back, is a lot more brownish, and it has a tinge of rufous on the rump sometimes. As you can see, the rufous extends a little bit up into the belly, where it becomes a bit buffy. The Cape Longclaw is quite interesting, as though it sounds like a cat when it flies. It has quite a meowy sound. So the Cape Longclaw, you cannot see it in this photo, unfortunately, but it has very long nails, which gives it the name Longclaw. The distinctive features of the Cape Longclaw is this orangey throat, contrasting with a black outline and then a yellow belly and eyebrow. The rest of the bird is quite browny, as you can see on the back. So the common starling is actually an invasive species from Europe, but it has colonized the area quite well and is now commonly seen in the grasslands, although it can often be seen in towns and gardens as well as elsewhere in the region. So the common starling in breeding plumage, such as in this photo, has a bright yellow bill and overall is quite glossy with a bit of iridescence. It has a lot of spots on it as well and very sharp wings. As I said, this is an invasive species, so it is not actually supposed to be here, but they have colonized the area very well. Now we move on to our LBJs. So LBJs are notoriously difficult to identify, but I'm going to try and simplify them down a little bit for you guys. So first up, the red-capped lark. It has this white eyebrow, although the white eyebrow is quite common in all LBJs, so that is not an identification feature that you should be focusing on. For the red-capped lark, the identification features you should be focusing on is this red cap and the red shoulders, or the rufous shoulders. So this is the only one that has this rufusy coloring. Overall, the bird is quite plain and unmarked, and is a lot lighter than other species. So moving on to the large-billed lark, as you can see, it is a lot more heavily marked. It is also a much more chunky bird than the red-capped lark. Another good feature of this is this large, heavy bill, which has that yellow lower mandible. So this bird is one of the more common grassland larks, and is not too easy to confuse with other species, although at a distance they can be quite confusing. But as I said, that large bill is diagnostic, as well as the heavier marked chest. Overall, the coloration of the bird is a lot darker, and it has got a yellow tinge to the belly as well, and in the chest. The Orgulus longbilled lark, although this species is at the moment its own species, it might in the future get lumped with a separate species, but I'm not going to dive into the taxonomy of the birds. We're just going to look at how to identify them. As the name suggests, it is a long-billed lark, and compared to the other larks, it has a lot more of a longer and thinner bill. The chest is also very heavily marked, even more so than the large-billed lark. And overall, the bird is quite brown and doesn't have any yellow tinge as with the large-billed lark. So the African pipit. Now pipits are probably the worst of the LBJs, but the African pipit is our most common pipit. So the African pipit has quite a bold white eyebrow, but it also has a lot thinner of a bill and a lot smaller of a bill than our larks. The back is quite well marked, whereas the chest is also slightly streaky. So the general shape of the African pipit is quite similar to larks, but the lighter bill, the slightly less marked chest, and the overall general impression of the bird is slightly different to the large-billed and the red-capped lark. The Zitting cisticola is our most common grassland cisticola, and one of our short-tailed cisticolas. So as you can see, it has a lot shorter of a tail than other cisticulars that we have covered before. The back is very richly marked, and it has this streaky brown crown. But the diagnostic feature is, as I mentioned earlier, that shorter tail, and it has a very harsh zitting call, which gives it the name. The African stonechat is probably the cutest bird that we have regularly in the grassland, and it has this bold black head, which contrasts very nicely to a rufous chest. It also has this white shoulder patch, which is quite easy to see. So this is quite a small bird, but it is very regular in the grassland and even in farmlands closer to town as well. Okay, so now we are moving on to our other species that are found pretty much all over. So our aerial feeders are birds that generally feed in the air, feeding on species like mosquitoes and flying insects. So that includes swallows, martins, and swifts. So first up, we have the greater striped swallow. So the greater striped swallow is a summer migrant, so it's only here during the summer months. The greater striped swallow has this rufous cap, but it has a plain cheek, as you can see. So the rufous does not extend down to here. It has a very pale chest, which is streaked with little black marks. You can't see it in the photo, unfortunately, but it also has a blue back in the top of the wings, which extends down to the tail. The rump, though, is the same color as the cap of the bird and is a pale rufusy color. The barn swallow is also a regular migrant. It is perhaps one of our most common swallows in the area during December and January. And if you stay anywhere near water, you could often see big flocks of barn swallows returning to roost by the wetlands. The barn swallow is distinctive in that it has a brown throat, contrasting with a bit of a blue head. Underneath, the bird is pale, but it has more of a buffy appearance than other swallows. The top of the bird and the wings and the back is also navy, and it has a completely navy rump as well, so it does not have the rufous rump of the greater striped swallow. The rock martin is a resident aerial feeder and is often seen around buildings as well. So the rock martin has much straighter and sharper wings than swallows and swifts, and overall the bird is quite brown. However, it does have white spots on the tail, which can be seen especially in flight. So our two regular swifts, or most regular swifts that we get in the area, is the white-rumped swift and the little swift. So both can be quite tough to differentiate, especially since they fly quite fast and often at a distance or quite high up in the air. The white-rumped swift, however, has a lot more sharper and more curved wings. So if you compare that here to the little swift, it has slightly blunter and wider wings. Another feature is the sharp forked tail of the white-rumped swift, which extends quite far out, whereas the little swift, it's a lot shorter and quite flat. Another regular swift, although more common up in the mountains and in fynbos areas, is the alpine swift. So the alpine swift is quite a large bird, and often if it flies close by, you can hear just that whoosh of the wings, that it is quite incredible. So the alpine swift is, as I said, it's quite large. I've even sometimes mistaken them for rattlers before with their size, but it has that same general swift shape. A diagnostic feature of the alpine swift is that white chest. So any of the other swifts, including the little and white rump, they have completely black chests, whereas the alpine has this white chest. It also has a lot wider forked tail, so it's almost like a mix between the tails of the white rump and little swift. It just has it's shorter, but it also forks. So the Cape Crow is one of our 3 corvids. I covered our other crow in the first webinar, Common Birds of the Garden Route in Clay and Karoo. So if you need to, you can go back and watch that again. But the Cape Crow differs from the other 2 crows in that it is completely glossy black. So it has no white on it whatsoever. It also has a sharp, longer bill than the other crows. So this bird is commonly found in farmland and in the Karoo as well. The white-necked raven is our largest corvid, and it differs from the other 2 crows in which it has a completely dark chest, but it has that white nape. So if you remember the Cape Crow, it was completely dark all over, and the pied crow had a white chest. This bird is probably the largest of our corvids, and it has a very heavy bill with a very small white tip, which can be quite hard to see sometimes, but sometimes it is quite bold. The rest of the bird is completely black. The black harrier. So harriers, they have quite a distinctive shape, which they're a lot longer and more slender than other raptors. So if you take a look at the black harrier here, it has that long tail, and it also has a white rump, which a lot of species do not have, especially raptors. The white windows in the wings are also quite diagnostic, whereas the rest of the bird is completely black. However, it does have a yellow eye, which can be seen very easily, especially in close quarters. So the peregrine falcon is the fastest animal in the world, reaching speeds of over 250 kilometers per hour during its stoop or its dive. So the peregrine falcon is quite common in the garden route, and that shape is quite diagnostic when it's in flight. It can often look like a swift with its sharp wings. It's got a very well-marked chest, as you can see here. It's a lot of black spots and blotches. The cap is quite dark, and then the black on the head extends down to the cheeks as well. As you can see there, it goes down a little bit. The eye ring and the bill often has a bit of yellow on it, which can be seen in close quarters, but it's very hard to see from a distance. The black-winged kite is also a common species wherever you go, and it is possibly one that you've seen many times, but have never been able to identify before. So the black-winged kite has these distinctive red eyes, which can be quite bright, but sometimes quite dull in younger birds. The bird is very pale overall, a very white head and belly and chest, whereas the shoulders and some of the wings are a lot darker and black. The back of the bird is this grey color as well. The common buzzard. This is one of our buzzards that are quite hard to identify sometimes, but it can be identified whereas it's almost completely brown all over, although it has some white bars through the chest and on the leading edge to the wing. The wings of the bird are quite white, although not nearly as white as in the jackal buzzard, which I covered in a previous session. The tail is a lot shorter than other raptors, but it is also longer than that of a jackal buzzard. Okay, that brings us to the end of our final bird identification session. So you guys are almost done with the training sessions now. I think there's just one more left. So just to cover the basics of this one, these are birds that are regularly found in the less diverse habitats of the garden route. So habitats like the forest and the wetland are far more diverse than the habitats that we covered in this session. If you have any questions or queries, you are more than welcome to ask by putting a message in the chat box or in the questions. I'm sure Andrew would be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to send me an email. Awesome, it was great to help you guys.
Okay, so that was Justin's second last webinar, actually. He Got the order wrong because I switched it around before he pre-recorded it. So we do have 2 more sessions left. There's one more with Justin that he's going to do on the birds of the Klein Karoo, which I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot of really cool birds, lots of LBJs. Steel yourselves for that. And then there's the last one from Dr. Daniel Dankwitz, who's a global bird guide with Rock Jumper, who's going to be giving us a session on how to guide birders, some of the quirks and things to be aware of when you have birding clients. So there is an option for Q&A. So we're going to do that now. Please put any questions in the Q&A box. In the meantime, there is your QR code for the 8th quiz. Remember, you have to complete the quizzes for us to credit you with participation in this webinar. So make sure that you finish the quizzes. Again, it's not about what marks you get. We're not going to pass or fail you. It's just about tracking your attendance and participation. Okay. Although I know everyone likes to get full marks. I've been a bit meaner, I think, in the last 2 quizzes. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm making them too hard, but I've tried to put a few curveballs in there to make sure that I'm making you use your apps and your field guides to try and get the right answer. So I hope people aren't going to complain too much. Anyway, so we'll get into the Q&A now. Okay, so Lynn has asked a question about the buzzards. So is the common buzzard the old steppe buzzard? Yes. So the steppe buzzard is a subspecies of common buzzard. It's found in, as the name would suggest, the steppes of Eurasia. And that is the most common subspecies that we have migrating to southern Africa, hence why we called it steppe buzzard, but that's actually the name of the subspecies. The common buzzard encompasses a couple of subspecies, and we just used to call it steppe buzzard because of the dominant subspecies we get in southern Africa. But if we're going to be completely correct, then it's the common buzzard. But generally in birding circles, everyone will know what you mean if you say common buzzard or steppe buzzard. Everyone is aware that you're talking about the same thing. That's at least if you've been birding for a few years and remember the old names, of course. So thank you for that question, Lynn. I don't see any other questions. I just see a few messages in the chat box thanking Justin for his excellent presentation. I feel like I need to remind everyone that that boy is 18 years old. Can you believe? I was definitely not that accomplished a presenter and birder at that age. It really is phenomenal what Justin's able to do and how much we can all learn from him. So I'm really happy we've got him on this series. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was session 8 of our 10 virtual Avitourism training webinars. I hope to see you back on Monday, and we'll see you again soon. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe and see you back soon.